Right. So we should be live any second. Yes. Okay. Well, hi everyone. This disembodied voice is Caitlin Cashin from the marketing team. Thank you for joining us for today's Gatsby Web Creators session with an intro to CSS. And now I will hand it over to Marcy and Aisha.
Hello, Gatsby learners. We're back today with another session of Gatsby Web Creators. I'm joined by Aisha Blake. Say hey, Aisha.
Hello.
Hello. So today, day 3, this is our second week of streaming Gatsby Web Creators. We're going to take an exploration into the magical world of CSS. Cascading style sheets are a way to style your web pages with your own style and flavor and color and fonts and all kinds of really fun things to take your HTML pages to the next level in creativity. But a quick question for you, Aisha. What would be your ideal pet friend, dog, cat, and any ideas? Like if you could have an animal, what would be your favorite? Or what would be your ideal companion?
Oh, that is really, really tough because I have a deep, deep love of dogs, all dogs. But I think I have the closest attachment to the golden retriever. Because I grew up with a golden retriever, and she was like she was mine. I loved her.
Gold retrievers are pretty awesome. I'm a big fan. I actually have a labradoodle named Rainier, and his mom was a lab, so kind of related to the retriever. But I had a dream a couple of years ago that I had a Pomeranian randomly, those little white, fluffy, or not white, they come in different colors, but the little poof ball
Oh
dogs.
yeah.
I had a dream that I had one, and I feel like some point in my life I'm going to have this poof ball dog. Yeah, so that's what I would say. It would be very out of character, but dreams don't lie. They give us ideas. Got to listen to those dreams. So we're going to have some animals today in our project that we're working on. We last week talked about HTML, how to use semantic elements to write text and put content on your pages. We're using the Glitch platform again today. We have on our mailing list. So if you're subscribed to our mailing list, you should have a link to the Gatsby landing page on gatsbyjs.com. And so we have our materials linked there. You can also find them on our Gatsby Web Creators team on Glitch. And so I've got a Scratch file here that starts with the content similar to what we used last week. So we've got our animal friends. I've added a couple of pictures here that you'll see, including my cat, Bagley. We'll get a better look at her a little bit later once we add some CSS to this page. But we've got a really great working structure here to start styling it from the defaults. So the defaults in the browser, and we talked a little bit about this last week with the user agent style sheet, which is what the browser gives us for free when we write HTML. So there's a white background color. It has this black text. The headings look bolder than regular text. We have italics if we specify those. All of the things that we played around with in our last 2 sessions, we're going to take those to the next level. So CSS is this program or presentational language that we can use to style our HTML. So the 2 formats work together. Your CSS will reference things in your HTML in a few different ways. But first, we need to get our CSS worked into our HTML file. And there's a few different ways we can do this. I'm going to opt in our HTML page. I'm going to add a link element. So I use the HTML syntax to create an element for link. I'm going to say rel for, what does that stand for? The rel. I'm going to say style sheet. I know it offhand, and I
Relationship.
Relationship. Thank you. I'm going to say type equals text/CSS to tell the browser that this is a CSS file that we're going to load. And then I'm going to say href, and the file I have here is called coolstyle.css. I'm going to close my element with it's a self-closing tag. So I do this slash and then close it. So this is in the head part of our HTML, that behind the scenes section of our page. So it will pull in this CSS file. And the CSS file we have in here, it has some comments which hint at the directions that we're going. But we need to add some stuff in here to make sure that this works. So going back to our HTML file, we have, let's see, we have our body element, we have our HTML element. If we put styles attached to those, they will do what's called cascading down to every element inside of those. So this nesting, you know, all of these elements inside of the body, we can target those generally by adding a style for the body. Right now, it has a white background color. I'm going to type background dash color pink with the keyword pink. All right, we've had our first little bit of success. The background color is now pink. And so I'm targeting this body element just by typing the word body, then a space, an opening curly brace, which you can get to with the shift key and a bracket on your keyboard. And then inside of here, so this is what's called a CSS declaration. Let me make this a little bigger. We've got what's here. The first part of this says background color. That's what property are we aiming for? Is it a color? Is it a font size? You know, what's the thing that we're trying to style on this particular element? And I'm giving it a value here of pink. So this is what's called a CSS color name. And in the README for our project, we have a couple of resources for you to reference. And this is both in the fully built out page that's on our landing page on gatsbyjs.com. It's also in this Scratch file that we're working with. But there's a great Learn CSS from Mozilla Developers link here that, depending on your familiarity with CSS, you can get a lay of the land to see what are all your options with CSS. And then this other thing I want to point you to, and I guess I should have opened that in another tab. That's okay, we can go back. But I have a link to the CSS Tricks website for a list of named colors and what's called hex equivalents. So hexadecimal is a type of a color format. It's these, you know, hash and then 6 letters or numbers to describe a particular color. But there's all of these color names that are really helpful, like black as a keyword, blue, brown, coral. And they, you know, run a full gamut of colors that make great background colors, great text colors. And so we can play with these by name. So this resource is linked in our README. I go back to our project on Glitch. So we've got this list of colors. I am going to go back to our README. I'm going to open this in a new tab just in case I want to add some colors. So you can copy any of these names using the Command-C command, say antique white maybe as a background. And we can go back to our CSS and set some of this overall style. So I had pink as a color. Maybe I want antique white.
Uh-oh.
Hey. Okay. We seem to be back online. Did we lose Marcy?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
So just bear with us for a second. We are live, Aisha, just FYI.
Yeah.
And it looks like we have also lost our captioner. So sorry, everybody, for the technical difficulties. All these people on the internet sometimes complicate all these streaming and online meeting things. So
Well, at least it didn't cut the stream off entirely. That would have been sad.
yes. Okay, yay. Oh, we've got Mike.
Woohoo!
All right. Yes, Aisha has asked if there are any questions while we're waiting. Now is a great time if you have any CSS or other questions you want to share.
All right.
All right, let's see.
Let me grab the.
Quarantine ends. You can be the first one to buy tickets to any musical you want. What do you pick?
Oh,
That's a good question.
I don't know. There are so many choices. I have a lot of feelings about musical theater in general.
Yeah.
And thank you, Sylvanestia, for posting the link. Yeah. I'm thinking about it. I think. I think I would really like to see the next thing I wanted to see that I had planned to see was actually Dear Evan Hansen, and so that would probably be the one for me.
Yeah, I've heard good things.
Takara, I'm interested to know what your answer would be, and anybody else in the chat who has opinions about musical theater. All right. Hopefully, I'm gonna check my messages to see how Marcy's doing.
Yeah.
But if not, I can absolutely jump in. I've also got the project up here, and yeah, it's a super tough decision. Thankfully this year there weren't too many that I was planning to go to. Oh, there's Marcy.
There's Marcy.
Hello.
Hey.
So that was weird. I was like talking, didn't hear anything, and I'm like, this feels weird. So I went and looked, and our streaming, my streaming tab was like, "Hey, join the party." I'm like, I already joined the party. What happened to the party? So thanks for your patience. Internet letting me down here for a moment. What have you all been chatting about?
Musical theater, actually.
Oh.
Yeah, nice. Takara just kind of guessed mine and Caitlin's souls, apparently.
Nice. Well, I was just going on and on about, styling animal friends over here and having my own party, I guess. So thanks for your patience as we apparently get kicked off of the internet.
This is real. This is real live.
This is real life.
Content right here. Yeah.
Yep. All right. So were there any questions about what we've been learning so far?
No CSS related questions.
Okay. All right. Well, we could get going. If you're all ready to dive back in, I'm sure ready.
Let's do it.
Okay. All right. So as I was talking to myself, I've been doing this back and forth from the HTML to our CSS. So you know exactly what are you even styling. So there's sort of two ways to go about that. Looking at the HTML. So, we've got these two sections. I can collapse these if I want to see how they sit next to each other. Section would be a good element to target so that anytime there is an instance of this element, it will inherit these styles that I'm going to set. And as we get into later sessions, like next week when we talk about layout, perhaps you have sections that sit next to each other in a grid, and maybe on mobile devices they move around. We're going to get to that in a future session. But we can still do really neat things kind of in their default column, as our content goes in one column down the page. So I'm going to target a section. And what I really want to do is kind of invert these colors so that the background that is now pink with black text, if I make that maybe darker, like indigo, kind of a bluish purple, if I change that, the text now is black on indigo, and it's pretty hard to see. And so what I want to do is make another default. Maybe I make it color white. And I love these color names because they're easy to remember. We have that list of named colors. And so those are pretty fun to play with, a little bit easier than learning some of the color formats, which are awesome too. So we've got our colors set. And now in my sections, if I wanted those to, let's say I wanted to add a background image. And if I've got something in my assets directory, here's Miss Bagley in here, Rainier the majestic Labradoodle. I have this pinkrice.png background. So if I click on this, it gives me a link. I can copy it. So this is what's called a repeating seamless background. And it is a little tile that if we use it as a background, it can fill the entire space seamlessly. And you can tile any image really, but the ones that are seamless that have, no edges can work really well for backgrounds. So in our section, I'm going to say background-image. I'm going to type URL to point to a file, open the parentheses, and I'm going to do Command V on my Mac for paste. I'll put a semicolon. So in CSS, the language really expects each declaration to end with a semicolon, or else the browser can't tell, one declaration to the next. So we have a background image now in these sections to fill, which is pretty neat. So I'm going to add something called border radius, border-radius. And I'm going to give this, let's see, maybe 10 px for 10 pixels. So it gets these rounded corners, which I have to say are a blessing, because back in the day, we had to do some really hacky stuff to get rounded corners. I mean, like little image corners. We tried to use JavaScript to make this happen. Border radius is amazing, and I love it. And you can even make full circles out of it. We can play with that a little bit later. But this white text is pretty hard to see with this background of, let's see, we had the indigo background and the white background color, or the white foreground color. So color is the foreground, so the text. And with this pink rice background, it's pretty hard to see. So I think we could add a color here, maybe indigo, to match that background. It's kind of an inversion. So we've got some nice color matching here. Let's see, what else should we add? Maybe space these sections out a little bit. So I'm going to add what's called margins and padding. So you could think of margins as being the outside of the box and padding being on the inside of the box. And so the padding would be nice here so that the kitty's text isn't right up along the edge. I'm going to use a unit. So 1 rem, R-E-M, for relative, maybe Aisha, you can help me with what all these items stand for.
Let's see.
So EM, it's root. It's like root relative element, or I just looked it up, and of course I can't remember now. It's a really neat unit. So earlier on, we added this font size of 18 pixels on the HTML element. By using rems, for a unit, for font sizes, padding, borders, like pretty much anything that has a size. I probably could have used it for border radius, but I went with a pixel unit. That way, when we create a padding or a font size based on rems, it can change based on this one pixel unit, and it's pretty awesome. You could have your font size like with a little slider, and everything moves and resizes. It's magical. So I'm going to use the rem here to say it's basically like a percentage. So one rem of 18 pixels is 18 pixels. And then as we have different elements inside of here, like headings, paragraphs, those have their own font size that come from the browser. And so we're kind of having a light touch to keep their own sizes they get for free, but we can change anything we want with more specific sizes. And using these rem units, you'll see it kind of flowed through the entire page. So we've got some padding in here. How about, oh, and I should say I put one rem here for padding, and that's referring to all four corners. And I want to show you a neat trick with the developer tools, where I click on it with Control on my Mac, and I'm going to do Inspect. And Aisha doing a little, I want to do a check and make sure I'm still, you could still hear me after I got kicked off before.
Yes, you're good.
Okay. I'm like, oh, it's hanging on to my lifeline here. So I've opened the developer tools, and we're going to look at this kitties box. So the styles tab is the first tab that pops up. There's also this computed tab in the dev tools, and it shows this box. So I can actually look at it in terms that show my actual content. So the box is this thicker border here. And borders are something we'll target as well. The margin is outside the box. The padding is this amount inside the box. So we'll see that in our code. If we go back here, so we've got padding on all four corners, and the way the notation goes is top, right, bottom, left. So if I wanted to have different values for each side, I can do them all separately. So I could say, let's say I'm going to do like a little more padding on the sides than on the top, because this looks pretty far from the top. There's a big gap here. So maybe I could say padding top, make that like half a rem, so half the size of the default. I could go in order around the circle, like padding right, we'll do 1 rem, padding bottom, just to really remember how that order goes around the circle, and then padding left, 1 rem. So that's right and left have 1 rem, and maybe the top and bottom have a certain size. So that's the inside of this box.
Our friend Resource 11 beat me to the punch and provided a really good way to remember the order of your padding and a couple of other properties use this as well. So we go top, right, bottom, left, and that's TRBL or trouble. So you can use that as a device to remember the order of those sides as you're using our shorthand properties.
Nice. That is, trouble. I like it. Here comes trouble. So we can list those all out individually. So if you wanted to target just one of those, just the left or just the right. And so margin and padding both have this kind of going around the circle clockwise. You can also use shorthand. So we saw the first thing I had listed was padding by itself, and that will target all 4 sides. You can also combine them. So if you have like just top and bottom or just left and right, I do that a lot. So here for margin, I have margin : 1 rem space 0. That's 1 rem on the top and bottom and 0 on the left and right. And that can be handy, so you don't have to write all of these out. You can also do this. You could put all 4 in line. So let's say I wanted the bottom to be slightly different for some reason. I wanted it to have like less space on the bottom. you can go top, right, bottom, left, all in line. So there's lots of shorthand here. Whichever ones you can remember the easiest are perfectly fine. If you want to spell them all out, each line like this, padding top, padding right, and so on, go for it. Whatever works for you. So I'd like to fix this image. It's overflowing. Bagley cannot be contained inside of this section. So I think we need to wrangle her into shape a little bit here. And if I go to my HTML, I'm going to close the dev tools. The Bagley photo is in a figure element. So I can target that to maybe I want to add a frame to it, kind of make it stand out more or something. And then the image is the actual, asset that we've pulled in from the assets directory. So I'm going to go in here to the image blocks section that I have commented and target the figure element. And let's say, so I'll start by adding the selectors I'm going to target for each element. Figure, fig caption, which is this Bagley the cat text down here. And then the IMG for image, that's the first thing I'm going to adjust. So the image, I forget the actual dimensions of the file, but that can factor into, is it a really big image, which should be, try to size them down for file size reasons. These downloads can get pretty big. I use Photoshop personally, but I think any kind of image resize tool can help you size images down for the web. But I'm going to do a max dash width of 100%. And that will get the Bagley image to fit based on the size of the container that it's in. So if I make my browser window bigger, Bagley will scale. She's pretty majestic here. So to describe the image for anyone who can't see it, Bagley is a Siberian white and gray cat, and she has her back legs back, and her tail does this wave like swoosh over her entire body. It's her way of begging for whatever she wants, water, food. Every time I turn around and see her doing it, I gasp. It's majestic. So now you've all seen Bagley and her really funny begging position. I think this really deserves more ceremony. Like a picture frame is really what I'd like to go for. So the figure element that wraps this image is a perfect place for that. So how about I add a background color and a border? That sounds cool. So I'm going to do background dash color, and I will make it, I'm going to use my first hex code here. So I'm going to do the hash symbol and then 333 for a dark gray. That's one of the colors that I remember off the top of my head that I use. But we also could go back to our CSS tricks and find, any kind of darker color. Maybe there's black. I didn't quite want it to be black. I'll just go with my dark gray for now, but you can use any named color or any hexadecimal color here, which is this hash 333. Let's see, I want to add a bit of padding here. So I'm going to add this one rem to give it a little bit of space inside of the container so that we see more of that background color on the left and right of the image, because the image went to the full edge of the box. This padding now, we can see more of the gray kind of all around four sides. And the fig caption down here is still the purple text on a dark gray. So I'm going to go and let's see, because I'm setting a dark background color on the figure, I'm going to add the color of white right next to it so that the background color and the foreground color that need to stand out are in the same element or the same. This is what we call a selector. So an element selector. There are other tricks that we'll talk about with selectors. Right now I'm targeting a single element at a time. So every figure element on the page, no matter whether it's inside of a special other element, like it's inside of a section, but I'm targeting every figure element that might show up on the page. So Bagley the cat's fig caption is showing up here. I'm also going to add a border. So I'm going to type border. I'm going to make this a 6 pixel border. It's going to be solid, and I'm going to give it a teal color to make it stand out. And you can see actually before I added my semicolon on border, the text here turned purple again because the next item in the row, it can't determine the beginning or the end. So that's where the semicolons are critical. So if your stuff is like broken and you're trying to figure out why is that not looking correctly, double check your semicolons. That's the browser kind of visually telling us that something's not quite right. So those semicolons are pretty critical. I'm also going to add a border radius. So let's give this a border radius of maybe 6px so that it has this neat rounded edge. And so where I put solid here for the border, I could also add something like dashed, give it a dashed border. So there's these little breaks in between. I could do dotted if I wanted like dotted borders, and maybe I could make those a different color. I kind of like the solid, so I'm going to keep that, but I also wanted to show you the ridge. It is a little hard to see with the border radius, so I'm going to comment. There is a command /. You can comment anything out, and that's like if you want to toggle it to test it. Maybe I make this border color turquoise to make it stand out a little more. And this ridge, so the ridge border is like a flashback to the 90s to me. It's got this like built-in kind of shading, and it makes it look sort of 3D, but it makes it look sort of retro. I don't know. Aisha, what do you think? Do you like the ridged border, or are you a solid border or some other kind of border fan?
I
Did
typically I will
lose
go
you
with
all
a.
again? That's
Oh
what I want to
no,
know.
no! Can you not hear me?
No, I did not.
Hey, chat. Could we get a sound check?
I can hear
No.
you.
Okay, you
Yeah.
can. Great.
Good.
So I am more of a solid border person, kind of
I'm hearing people
flat.
okay.
Um, a flat design type deal, but every once in a
You can go back
while,
to the solid.
I do a ridged. I'm also a fan of like salmon, the color though. So like, take what I say with a grain of salt.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Salmon. What does that look like on here? So salmon. Oh, there it goes. So we've got this salmon color. Okay. I'm going to leave the white, though. I think the white looks pretty good. I did hear our audio just kind of change. Like I was hearing other people talking, and so yeah, want to make sure we're all good. Let's see, what else are we going to add? Okay, so we've got our figure, and what's really cool, so I mentioned we were targeting every figure element and image, and if we scroll down to Rainier down here, he's got this style as well. So that's pretty cool. You can target based on element. Let's see, what else do we want to add? I really want to show you some neat stuff with block quotes and text. And so let's see. What I really want to do is, what if we could have text that had an image background? I don't know if you've ever seen that, where the actual, like, instead of a solid color for the text, having like an image there. And so that's what I want to show you is
Fancy.
these clipped text quotes with backgrounds. So I'm going to start by styling the block quote element first. I'm going to use what's called a CSS class to make this a little more portable, but I'm going to start by styling the block quote to look a little more stately and impactful. So I'm going to give this, it looks like it's text align left already. So I'm going to leave that. I'm going to give it a different font family of monospace. So right now there's two different fonts styles coming in. So I think fonts will be our next direction for this lesson. That we have what's called a serif. So I'm going to zoom way in here. And we can see this really well in our headings. So there's little feet on these letters. So like on the S of doggos, it has these little feet. And then on this monospace font that I just pulled in, which is whatever is the default monospace font on my computer, it is something that has the same width for every character. Monospace fonts are really great for code. They also just look pretty cool. So I'm going to use a monospace font here. There are other types of fonts that we'll look at in a moment. Zoom out a little bit here. So font family, monospace. Let's see, what else do I want to do? I want to make these font sizes bigger. So, and I don't know what happened to my styles just now. Hopefully they come back. Glitch is having a glitch. So font size, yep, the styles came back. I'm going to say 2 rem here. So I want this to be bigger than the default, like really big. Really big so that when I give it an image background, we see the weight of it more. So let's give it more of a font dash weight of bold. So the default is normal font weight. Now if I add font weight dash bold or font dash weight colon bold, we get this thicker text that, the bigger it gets, the more we can see that image shine through. So maybe even bigger, maybe like 3 rems or something. And so, it starts to get a little like the text, especially in a phone or like this smaller column in my browser, the text can start to overflow. So maybe I'll leave it at 2 for now. But I'm going to, this came with some margins by default, so it has some space on the outside of it. I'm going to give it margin of 0. So I'm going to 0 out those margins. Now it can go the full width of the container that it's in. So let's see what else. This has the 2 quotes on this page. So there's the one of the up above, the cats are mysterious. And then down in this one, we have this cite element. So whoever said it, like who are we citing with this quote? And if I go back to our HTML, I can see, where is our quote? It is right here. So we have block quote, and it actually has a class on it that we'll use in a moment. It has this cite element. And so I want the cite to be the quote and whoever said the quote and have that be slightly smaller. And while we're in here, I can show you that the block quote has this attribute on it that says class equals, and within the quotes, it has this, what we call a string of clipped text. So a single word, no special characters or numbers, and it has all of these alpha characters that we can put into a CSS class. You can include numbers in class names, you just can't start with a number. And so we'll pull that in a moment, but I'm going to start with block quote space cite. So I'm targeting the cite element inside of a block quote, which might be slightly unnecessary if, cite is always inside of a block quote. We could target it just by itself, but, say somebody puts a cite in their HTML without knowing what it's for, and it's not inside of a block quote. So then if we apply the style, it would look weird. So I'm just going to be, a little careful and put a block quote to target. So the way CSS selectors work is these spaces here denote nesting. So the cite is inside of the block quote. If I put a comma in between, that would target multiple elements. So a block quote and a cite. And then if I wanted to keep that cascade, for example, I could target the block quote by itself, the comma, and then a cite within a block quote. So you can kind of chain these selectors together if you want. We don't really need that in this case. I just wanted to show it to you. So the cite, it looks like it is an inline element, which means it flows right after the end of the other text in the block quote. So I'm going to make it sit on its own line with the display property. This is the first time we've seen this, of display of block. So I can get it to drop down to the next line, similar to how we saw with the line break element, but we can have the entire box that the cite sits in, make it a box that sits by itself with display block. I could go back to the way it was with display inline. So that puts that text, then it flows, as if it were just text. But I'm going to make it more of a box with display block. And there's some other display properties we'll get into next week with positioning and layout. But that is our first introduction to block versus inline styling. So I'm also going to change the font family here, font-family, and I'm going to say sans serif. So I'm changing this from, originally the browser was giving us a serif, and we haven't overridden the font really at all before this. So that's still a serif font. It has those little feet. I think it's Times maybe on my browser default. And then our block quote is currently a monospace font. And now we have a sans serif font, which doesn't have the feet. So you can look at the difference between, excuse me, a sans serif, so without the little feet, versus a serif font or a monospace. They all have their own characteristics, which are pretty fun. So I'm also going to make this site font style of italic. So you can go between normal, italic. I think it already had italic by default, or did it? Let's see. I'm going to comment it out. It was already italic, so I don't really need that one. So what I'd like to do, I think, is make this slightly smaller than the quote itself, so that the quote really stands out, and then who said it is kind of supplementary. So I'm going to make this slightly smaller, and I'm going to use a new font size unit that we haven't seen before. It is 0.5 EM instead of REM for rem. And so the rem is it's a root element, as I accidentally zoom in with my fingers. Whoops. So we've got the rems everywhere else will go off of that HTML element that we set 18 pixels for a font size all the way at the top. If I used rem here, it would still base this, it would be half of, it kind of goes through the whole cascade of elements and becomes a little bit hard to manage. I really want this to be relative to the block quote itself. So I'm going to use M's for that to make it respond to kind of its context instead of the overall page. It's a way to kind of adjust font size in this really flexible way, but still have relationships. So the site is related to the quote in that we kind of want those to grow and in their relative sizes to each other. So we've got some defaults here. Now I'm going to pull in that clipped text class that we saw. So in our HTML, we had class equals clipped text. So to match that in a selector for a class, it is dot and then the name of the class. So clipped text. So I am now targeting any element that has this class of clipped text. There's also what's called an ID. So if it was a single item, maybe like my global header could be a single item and it has an ID or something like that. This is denoted with this hash instead of a dot. So this is class versus ID. Classes are more portable, they're reusable. So I'm going to go with that for now. But for our clipped text, I'm going to give it a background dash color of green. Or actually, let's make it dark green. Dark green. But we're going to use this as a default. Maybe I'll hold off on that. Let's add that back in a moment. I'm going to start with background dash image, and we're going to go over to our assets. And I have this green trail image here. So it has lots of really neat greens and it has some texture. I think this was taken near Seattle somewhere. I don't exactly remember.
Pretty.
It's it's kind of like, I don't know, what's Narnia? Every time I post a photo of a trail, people are like, are you in a magical land somewhere?
It really looks like it.
So I copied this image URL. So this is Glitch. They put it in what the CDN stands for Content Delivery Network. It's a really great way to host your images. So we're going to follow Glitch's lead here and use that image URL. So background image, it takes the URL, and then in the parentheses, I paste my image background. So right now, you can see this box for the clipped text class. The entire image is covering, it's covering the entire box. What I wanted to do is replace this purple text with the image, and then it will sit over its background a little bit nicer so we can read it more. I'm going to do a few other things here. Background dash size contain, and we'll see this. The image now fits the width of this box. It's repeating, so you can see the edge of that image as its size. It was a little too small based on the height and width of the box that this text is in, so the image repeats. That's basically what our tiled, pink rice background is doing, but that image is seamless, so you don't see these edges. But the repeating you can change with the background repeat property. Right now, what we're going to do, and I might even change this from contain to cover, because I want it to kind of stretch and fill. And that way it will cover the entire box as needed. And so the magical property that I'm going to use here is called background-clip, and I say text. I've also found in the Chrome browser where I'm working right now, it expects a prefixed version. So I'm going to do -webkit -background-clip. And this might be a somewhat experimental approach to this, so it might need to work, might need to be tested in different browsers. So I've got this background clip text now. It is not covering the background, but our purple text is back. So I need to override that with color transparent. And so you can say colors are transparent if needed. And we are back, and that worked. So changing the color from, it was inheriting that purple style through the cascade. Now we have a transparent color, so our clipped text shows through, which is pretty awesome. Cats are mysterious, and it has this green text in the back, or green image in the background showing through. So as your text is, you could make it even bigger and see more of that color and texture, which is pretty neat. And in case, say in your browser, it doesn't support background clip, like we were seeing here before, like if I comment out this WebKit thing, that is now showing this image, but maybe as a fallback, you add a dark green text color or something. You can play with fallbacks, like play with, testing it in another browser. And if it doesn't actually work right, maybe you make the text white over the background or something to make it show better. It's good to test things to make sure what you're playing with actually works in, different types of phones. Like grab your friend's phone, pull up your web page. You can use your little glitch URL here to go test it out and see, how is this looking? Do I need to play with it some more and change it some more? Things like that. So we've got our clipped text. Let's see, we've got this class. Maybe to show you how classes can work, we've got this text up here at the top. If I played with adding a class, we have an ID here that I'm not really using that could be matched as a selector. I'm actually going to add a class of clipped text, and now we can see that class, which is portable and reusable, has been applied to a completely different element from the block quote. It's applying it to everything inside of the header, which is pretty cool. It's pretty hard to read, so I'm not going to leave it there. I just wanted to show you how CSS classes work, how you can apply them to apply styles that you reuse a lot. So I'll pause for questions, and in our last little bit, I want to play with adding a custom font. So if there are any questions, feel free to shout them out. In the meantime, I'm going to go over to our README and go find our next resource. So we have a couple in here. There is a link for seamless backgrounds if you want to find some of those. The one I really want to go to here is the Google Fonts website, which is amazing. It's a really cool resource. It's fonts.google.com. There are free fonts that you can load into your website. I believe Google's You have to be 13 to have a Google account or get the permission from your parents. So the Google fonts you can load directly into your web pages. So I can look through categories, and this is where those keywords came up that we had, like serif, sans serif. There's monospace. I can check these on and off. Say I want only monospace fonts, or maybe only serif fonts that have these little feet. I can play, let's do maybe like a display font. I really want something for our headlines. We could also play with handwriting, maybe Pacifico or any of these fonts. I might go with display. I mean, you can check multiple if you want it to have a collection of many. And we can also look at font properties. You could look at the language if you really want something that looks better in your native language. I'm going to add maybe a thickness. So I want like a thicker, chunkier heading. Something really fun like this column I like a lot. And I'm going to I'm going to use bold. There is a performance kind of like file size concern. If you load a lot of font weights, they have a cost to them in terms of the amount of size that you have to download. So I'm going to select this bold 700. It is now a selected family. I could download it if I wanted to host the files myself, upload them to that assets directory maybe, but I can also go to the embed tab. And there are two different ways you can do this. There's a link and an import. They're pretty synonymous. This link tag, I'm going to copy. So there's two parts that we'll have to get. I'm going to start with copying this link. And similar to our CSS file, how we linked it in the head, I'm going to drop down in the head of our HTML and paste this with Command V. So now I'm pulling in the Google font. It is being loaded into my browser, but I'm not using it yet, so we don't see it. So I'm going to go back to our CSS, and I'm going to go from Google Fonts. I will copy this CSS rule to specify the family. I need to tell my CSS where this font should actually show up. So it's not being used quite yet. And to do that, I'm going to add, let's see, I really want to target all of these headings. So the H1, the H2, all the way through H6. So I'm going to target H1, comma, H2, and so on, H3, H4, H5, H6. So now I'm targeting every one of those headings, and I'm going to paste my code from Google Fonts. So I have now loaded this column cursive. So cursive is another keyword if, say, the Google font didn't load. Similar to how we used the keyword for monospace or for sans serif, there's also a cursive keyword, and it will load whatever cursive font is on your machine, your computer. But as long as Google Fonts downloads, we can use column by name. So now on our page, we're using something other than the default Times font. And so you can play around with loading fonts by style or by name. And it's really neat to get to play with those. I know we had a question in our last stream about fonts. So yeah, you want to try and use the fonts that you're loading from sites like Google, use them sparingly just for font size purposes and performance. But we can also do things like in our body, maybe I set a default font family. I wanted something other than the default. If I wanted that all to be sans serif, unless I say otherwise, maybe I can use a font that's really common on a lot of computers like Verdana. I could say, load Verdana off of the computer first if they have it, and if they don't, fall back to a sans serif instead of a serif, maybe. So that can be pretty cool. You can play with, sizes and colors and all kinds of really neat things. I think the last trick I want to show you is why all these rems and ems and, setting the font size on the HTML element. What's really cool, if I zoom out a little bit so we can see more of this page, if I change, say 18 to like 24 or something like that, or maybe like 40, make it bigger and bigger, everything on the page has adapted. It has all grown, all the spacing, the font sizes, the images, not really, because then they'd overflow. So those scaling, we can see the text did get bigger, but the image size itself, we still want it to fit in the layout. But everything on this page now has grown to kind of reflect this overall size, which is pretty awesome. Makes it easier to maintain and tweak. I'm going to go back to 18, and everything kind of goes back down to a size that's reflected off of this HTML element. You can also just inspect it in the developer tools. And if I go to our HTML element here inside of this frame from the glitch site, I can play with it in the developer tools, just going here and playing with the size, and you could see everything move. And it's a really powerful way to do it with the rems and the ems. Takes a little getting used to, but you will thank yourself later when you're not trying to find spaghetti code of font sizes kind of all throughout. You can make these overall size changes pretty easily using the HTML font size and rems. So yeah, we're nearing the end here of this stream. So I wanted to pause for some questions and see, if you have any requests for what you'd like to learn. We'd love to hear that. I know
Absolutely.
next week we'll be playing with layout and positioning, kind of getting things so they're more than one column of content. So yeah, that's some fun with colors and fonts.
Yeah, looking forward to starting to talk a little bit more, getting a little deeper into CSS and how to kind of move things around and plot out your page. So right now, kind of everything is flowing in one single column. We're going to talk next week about how we can lay things out in different ways, potentially even depending on the width of your browser or the width of your screen.
Yes. Oh, that'll be really neat. And so for, remixing this project on Glitch, if you want to take this further, the things that we didn't quite get to are like the details and summary elements here, maybe playing with the summary. That's what I have this little blue box around. You could make that text bold maybe and play with some margins. We have this HR for the horizontal rule. I guess we have 3 minutes, so I'm gonna do something for the HR. So HR space. I want to give it. I'm gonna say zero out the border that it had, so with border none. So that takes it away, but I'm gonna add it back in by saying background dash color. Maybe I'll make it black, and I could give it a height of. I mean, we could try 1 rem. Let's see how high that is based on the font size. Pretty chunky, so maybe I'll half that and do 0.5 rem, or maybe even 2.25. It's a percentage based on that HTML element size, and I could fill this with a background image if I wanted, or I could make it hot pink, whatever color I want, so that separator now has a bit different style than the default.
Nice.
So yeah.
We did get a question from Owly Pixel. How do you check if the font was loaded from CDN or from your computer?
Ooh, good question. So I would do that by inspecting and going to the developer tools. And so there's the styles to see what was specified. And then if you go to computed, you can see potentially how the cascade is working. So I guess there's that part of it. And maybe someone has a better answer here, but I also, on my computer, I have a tool called What Font. And this is kind of a handy tool. We'll see if it actually works on Glitch. I haven't tested this, but in the real world, I would use a tool called What Font sometimes. And that can tell me what font actually loaded on any website, not just your own. But I think it might be having a bit of a hard time with the Glitch platform at the moment. But yeah, happy to take any suggestions for checking which font has actually loaded, because it's not super obvious in here with the.
Yeah. So if you go to, we're getting a little advanced. some of the other tabs. So I think in your either sources or network, you might be able to see which.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. So yeah, in sources you can go and see, and there's a lot more sources here because we're looking at glitch and it comes with a lot of its own infrastructure. But you could potentially look there. So some of these items have moved around in recent memory, and so it can be sometimes difficult to tell. There's this network tab, and we can do more of an exploration through the DevTools in future lessons.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that is correct, that you could look to see what's loaded. On a web page that's by itself, it's a little easier to observe because you don't see all of the like glitch platform things. But so yeah, keep the questions coming, and we will see you the same time next Friday for our next installment in Learning CSS.
Yep, and
Awesome.
we will have the recording available on YouTube later today, and of course it stays up on Twitch for like 2 weeks. So feel free to revisit any of the material. You can also email us any questions at web-creators, I think, is that right, at gatsbyjs.com. There's a link to the main page for the program in the Twitch channel description. And yeah, thank you all for joining us, and thank you, Mike, for captioning today, and thanks Marcy and Aisha for joining us, and thank you all for bearing with us through our technical difficulties.
It's real life over here, so thanks for joining us.
Yes, absolutely. We'll see you next week.
See ya.
Yeah.